Hi everyone, it's Laura from Three Kittens Needle Arts. Today I'm going to give you some tips on how to weave in your ends invisibly. This is important if you are working on an item that the back side of the item will show sometimes, like on the cuff of a sweater that you roll up, or if you have a reversible item, that type of thing. So the first thing that I'm going to recommend is that you try it on whatever fabric you're working with. Try it out on a swatch first and make sure that it is actually going to be invisible. Cotton yarns in particular are a little difficult to make this technique work perfectly. Also, if you have a very open fabric, sometimes you will see some of this. With those types of situations, if possible, you should weave your ends in the seam if there is one. Otherwise, you know, you're going to have a little see-through, but it may be better than a normal method of weaving in. So I've got two swatches here. I've got a plain stockinette one, and then I've got a 1x1 rib. And I'm going to show you on both of them. I'm going to show on the plain stockinette one first. So the key with stockinette, with weaving in your ends invisibly, is to follow the line of the stitch. And I've got some white yarn here so I can show you exactly what I mean. So for instance, if I was weaving in an end here, I want to follow the line of this stitch here. So I'm coming up here and then following the path of the stitch. And I'm hoping the light is good enough here to see this. And then going back, following that same stitch. So it's going down this way. So that's one stitch done. And then same for the next stitch. This is also known as duplicate stitch when you're doing it like this on the right side of the fabric. So there you go. You're going to want to do the same thing. I'm just going to pull this out and we're going to look at it on the wrong side, because that's more likely where you're going to be weaving your ends in. And you're going to do the same kind of thing here. So if I was going to work on, say, this stitch here, I would come up from bottom to top on this bump, and then the bump to the right of it, I would go from bottom to top, the right and up one from it. And then following the line of that stitch, go down the bump that's to the left and just above the original bump. And from top to bottom of the original bump. So I'll do a couple of these. And I'm going, instead of pulling it all the way through here, I'm going to go up through the bump that's to the right and above it, because it's just a shorter, it just takes less time. And same thing on the other side of that stitch. Go down that bump and then the original bump. So I've done 2 stitches, and that's basically the technique. It's just following the path of the yarn as it goes through the stitches that are side by side. Okay, So now let's do it with some of the yarn that is the color of the knitting, and you'll see how it kind of disappears in. All right. So you just have to make an educated guess on this, on where to put the first pass. I'm going to go up through here. The yarn is coming out back here. It just seems like it will work. So then up through the bump, from bottom to top of the bump, just to the right and above the bump that you just went through. Then you follow the path of the stitch down through that bump. That bump is just to the left and above the first bump you went through, and then down through the first bump. And then you continue doing that. So you go to the next bump in that line, from bottom to top of the bump, just to the right and above the previous bump. Follow the line of the stitch down from bottom to top, from top to bottom of the bump to the left and up from the original bump, and then down through the original bump. And I'm going to do a couple more where I'm not pulling through each one, but pulling through 2 bumps at a time. So up through the bump, up through the bump that's to the right and right above the bump that you were in, down through the next bump over in that row, and down through the original bump. Up through 2, down through 2. If you split the stitch, it's not the end of the world. Don't worry too much about it. This is unspun yarn, so it's easy to split the yarn. All right. So there you go. You can see that it's not very visible on the back side, and on the front it's not visible at all. So now if we were doing that in ribbing, it's a little bit more difficult because you've got knit stitches and purl stitches. You know, let me pull this white thread out, or white yarn out, and then I will show you if I can. All right, I'm going to show you the line in this, and then it's actually getting a little dark here. My light is leaving, so I'm not sure I'm going to get to show you with the actual yarn, but you'll get the idea with this white yarn. So let's say this is the front, so we're going to flip it over to the back, and we're going to follow the line of the stitches. So since the yarn is coming out here, I would probably start, let me just think for a second. I'm probably just going to start right through here. And then following the line of that stitch, it goes under this. Then it doesn't go over to the next knit stitch. There's a purl stitch in between, so you have to spread it out a little bit. And you can see that that stitch goes right through here. So you're going to go from bottom to top, from top to bottom of that bump. And then you're going to go back to where you originally came out here and go through, well, I'm sorry, I'm slightly off, but you'll get the idea. I think it's just where I started, sorry. Nonetheless, you just are following the path of the yarn as it goes through the ins and outs of the ribbing. The transition from the knit stitch to the purl stitch is where you're going to question yourself. So you just have to look at where the yarn was going. It went up here, through here. Now it's going down through this bump. And then it's got to go through this bump. And then up through this bump. Up this bump. And then it goes back into a knit stitch. So you're just going to continue to do this, and when you're done, it's going to look like that. And so if you do this with your working yarn rather than a white yarn that I used, you will not see it. You see a little bit of the pink there, but because it's the white there, because it's following the path of the stitch, when you're using the pink yarn, you will not see that at all. So I hope that helps you. That is the best way to hide your ends when you're trying to do an invisible, trying to make your weaving in invisible. Thanks a lot, and good luck.